is for me.
Yeah.
To keep?
If it's okay with Alan.
Yeah, sure. And this was the issue of why he, the First Amendment right for recording between the prosecutor and the defense attorney. That's my belief.
You know he's recording right now?
Yeah.
As long as it's okay with you.
Mr. McDowell, my name is Dr. Fanto.
Okay.
I'm a psychologist from Eastern State Hospital.
Okay.
The reason I'm here today is the court's asked me to evaluate your competency to stand trial.
Mm-hmm.
I have to prepare a letter to the court regarding that.
Mm-hmm.
A copy of that letter will go to the judge, to the prosecutor, to your attorney, to if you're in jail, it goes to the jail's medical unit, and another copy goes to Frontier Behavioral Health.
Mm-hmm.
Anything we talk about today can go into that letter. I can't keep anything confidential.
Mm-hmm.
You do have a right to have your attorney present.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk to your attorney before answering questions. If there's questions you don't want to answer, you don't have to answer them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any questions about any of the information I just gave you?
No.
All right, so typically start by asking people some background questions.
Okay.
And I usually just start with, where were you born?
I was born in Spokane, Washington at Sacred Heart Hospital in 1983.
Grow up here?
Yes.
Do you know if your mother used any drugs or alcohol while she was pregnant with you?
No.
Do you have information about your early development, like whether you learned to walk at the usual times, talk at the usual times, any delays in those
No
areas?
delays.
Who were you raised by?
Well, until I was 4, I was raised by my grandparents because my mom was on a lot of she had mental health problems, and she couldn't take care of me. And then I moved in with my father and stepmother in the West Valley School District area. And then I moved back with my mother and grandparents from grade 4 all the way through high school.
Siblings?
I had step siblings when I lived with my father until he got a divorce somewhere around 1992, I think, or is when, and I never saw them again. And then a half brother, but he passed away and I didn't know him well.
You mentioned your mother had some mental health problems. Do you know what those were?
Anxiety disorder. And she's written a lot of false reports on me because of that mental illness, is my belief. And I've looked through the records and I disagree with her statements, which cause malpractice. So the statements she made to mental health providers resulted in malpractice from all the notes that I've reviewed.
Anyone else in your family have any mental illness?
I believe my aunt has some anxiety disorder to obsessive compulsive related, and the same with her. She's both are overly aggressive and near to physical violence and such, and both of them wrote false or made misleading statements to the medical industry on myself. And from what I've read from anxiety disorders is creating extreme dangers where dangers don't exist. So.
What was it like for you growing up? How was your childhood?
It wasn't very good because my mom was continually taking psychiatric drugs and overdosing on too many pharmaceutical pills, bags of pills related to mental health and related to other pharmaceuticals that didn't relate to mental health too, which I considered she was taking because she was a hypochondriac. And she'd become threatening and sometimes violent with my grandparents over money, and if she doesn't get what she wants, she throws a fit and would harass my family members.
Is this going
Yeah, that's our. We can
I'm
move
okay
into
with it.
My room, but that's gonna happen in here.
I'm not against. HIPAA protections, I guess.
well, it's more that I don't want interruptions.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that actually threw me off. So you're saying that your mom would throw fits and
Yeah.
trying to get money
And she'd
from
cause problems with me too.
Okay.
A lot of jealousy and wanting my grandparents' money, and she didn't really do much for me. She only made me one meal growing up that I can remember, and so my grandma pretty much took care of her, and my grandfather too took care of her. And she has a lot of college degrees, but she'd run out huge debts and start screaming and yelling and shouting and breaking things to get things. Which is why I take on the mental health industry, is because she would get information from her psychiatrist, then she would use the information provided by the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the counselors, and she would take their statements and misuse their statements in a threatening way towards my grandparents and the rest of the family members.
Did you experience anything you would consider abuse?
Neglect and just neglect.
CPS ever get involved?
No.
How old were you the first time the police talked to you about something you were in trouble for?
That was a week before AutoZam. That was that was March. 9th, 2006, and it was a plan. I was a political action committee founder, and it was a planned interaction with the police department off a briefing from a bar with a carry coordinator. I was the former Kucinich presidential coordinator in 2006, and I was building the Progressive Democrats of America Political Action Committee, and I decided to take on the mental health industry and law enforcement, and I had an interaction with a police officer named Raymond Harding,
Okay.
and I briefed him on what my credentials were, whom I was connected to, which was my main mentor in politics was the former president of Physicians for Social Responsibility. Her name was Geraldine Haynes from Kirkland, Washington. And she was the former state coordinator for the Dennis Kucinich campaign. I was the congressional district coordinator. And she was kind of mentoring me to create the Progressive Democrats of America Political Action Committee in Spokane, Washington. And so I held 30 individuals up in that meeting and spun the news that I had been wrongfully had use of force against me by Officer Raymond Harding, which was days before.
What led to the incident?
The incident with Raymond Harding?
Yeah.
It was that the statement made by the former carry coordinator, whom I don't know if she really was the carry coordinator, but she stated that there was wrongful use of force throughout Spokane. They were one of the worst police departments in the country for use of force. And if an individual just stepped off the sidewalk, they would be pounded into the ground. Now, recently in 2016, I had a interaction with Officer Sherilyn Redmond, who stated that officers would go onto a scene and pound people to the ground without asking any questions. So there was political justification for what I did in 2006 in getting into a disagreement with Raymond Harding, where I had stepped off the sidewalk across from Frontier Behavioral Health in a protest. And after I was detained, then there were a lot of political activists looking for me, because the first political action committee, Progressive Democrats of America Political Action Committee Foundation meeting was like 2 days later, and so everybody was looking for me, and so there were people all over the state wondering where I had gone, and so
what did you get charged with?
There was no charge. He took me up to Sacred Heart, and Sacred Heart would not provide me a proper assessment, and Dr. John Tran wrote bad notes and chemically restrained me to the point that I with tranquilizers and Geodon or something, and I lost my memory, my ability to write. And what I did was I called up the media with the credentials I had as a political coordinator and told them to look for any case involving wrongful use of force, mental health. And I had a lot of activists. I called around some of the activists that would be in my meeting, the Progressive Democrats of America Political Action Committee, that was planned in Annie's bookstore on St. Patrick's Day parade along the route on that day. And word got around that I had been wrongfully detained, and I had been, my life was in danger because I was barely breathing. They had tranquilized me so much. I was having all kinds of problems. And so people around started looking into the police department, and an individual named Judah Shattuck, who is the state coordinator for the Progressive Democrats of America, came all the way over here to help found that meeting. She was the trainer for that political action committee, Judah Shattuck. And Judah Shattuck, then word got out, because she'd come all the way over to Spokane, and word got out, and everybody started looking into the police department. And I believe some of those activists got into AutoZem kind of deal. So it was more of a planned strategy against law enforcement and the mental health industry wrongfully detaining and not properly assessing. So there was goals involved, and I had the ideas to build memory programs, the company, after that, which I did, and I was published for.
All right.
So that was the first law enforcement mental health.
No, do you have any juvenile record? Any juvenile encounter? Okay.
And before that, I was a bank teller. So at that, okay.
We'll get into all that.
Okay, sorry.
It just helps me to go in order.
Uh-huh.
You ever set any fires you weren't supposed to?
Nope.
Ever harm an animal?
Nope.
How far did you go in school?
College, I got a social services degree and a bank teller certificate, and I graduated high school, which in my medical files, it states that I never graduated. So I got my social services degree from SFCC.
Is that a 2-year or a 4-year degree?
2-year degree. And bank teller was a certificate that's like 1 quarter. And that's from SCC, Spokane Community College.
Back when you were in school, what kind of grades did you usually get?
I got, in high school, I got C's, mostly. And in college, I didn't do so good because I was taking liberal arts and I didn't do so good, but in social services, I got mostly A's, B's. And I was president of the Service Learning Club at Spokane Falls Community College, too.
Okay, you were president of what?
The Service Learning Club.
Back in school, were you ever in special education classes?
No.
You
I was
maybe-
also captain of the football team, and I won all league in football, and I had weightlifting records too, which Dr. Tran stated were all delusional in his first, in our first visit. I concentrated mostly on sports in high school. And I was best personality in the class too in the yearbook.
How'd you get along with the other kids at school?
Good, because I was captain of the football team and I was best personality. They voted for me. Everybody loved me. I was humorous, could crack jokes, and I never fought with anybody, and I never got in a physical altercation.
Get in any trouble in school? Suspended, expelled?
Not
anything
once.
seriously? Alright, now let's talk about your work history.
Okay.
So you've been a bank teller, you said?
So the first job I had was farmhand in high school. The second job I had was at Spokane Falls Community College. And that was athletic grounds aid or something, you know, to take care of the fields and take care of the sports equipment and organize, and I worked for the sports manager,
Okay.
like the athletic manager, I think, for equipment and such.
Okay.
And then after that, I worked at a casino as a check cashier. And Dr. Tran wrote that up as a delusion too, how much money I could handle and such like that. I was a check cashier at the Coeur d'Alene Casino. I worked for about 7 months and worked overtime, did well, and moved on. And then after that, I got my bank teller certificate, and I worked at, let's see here, I got my bank teller certificate. Then I worked at Farmers Merchants Bank for a few months, and as a teller. And then after that was when the Raymond Harding incident. So I went back to school, and after I recovered from all the tranquilizers and the memory loss and all the problems I had in 2006.
Hold on just a sec.
And then
Is
the
there
next
a
job.
reason you don't want to do this in the office where it's more private?
Oh, yeah, we
I
can do it in
mean,
the office.
let's.
You don't like the interaction.
Sorry, man. It's not your fault. You're
Yeah, this, I'll give it to you. I have something in there.
in 2006, working at Fanto.
Yeah, and then right after that is when an incident occurred, this Randy Hutton incident. And so I decided to go back after I recovered my brain, you know, and I had severe memory loss from all the tranquilizers and drugs I chemically withdrew. And then I went back to school for social services, and I worked, that's when I worked for the city of Spokane on that memoir project under the supervision of the plaintiff. While I was president of the Service Learning Club and through the Service Learning Club. And I worked for a few months, got a letter of recommendation, and took everything that I had learned through East Central Community Center and the city of Spokane I worked at Royal Park Care Center for a year in the Alzheimer's dementia unit as a activities coordinator. And then I developed memory programs, which is an interactive program to calm and engage individuals like video games for the television. And I got a letter of recommendation from Matt Fleming, who is the what do you call it? He's the head of the nursing home at Royal Park Care Center, the director of Royal Park.
Are you working now?
So wait, after that, okay, so I got after that, then I designed memory programs and I sold programs to mental health units around the country. And I was provided an invitation to the state activities conference and provided a speech and sold products. And so I was selling products until around 2012. And then like video games, and I have 3 publications, one in Prime Magazine, one in Creative Forecasting International Nursing Home Magazine, and one in Health Northwest Magazine, where I'm published with Dr. John Tran on video game programs for mental health, Alzheimer's, dementia. And then
What was that last magazine?
In Health Northwest Magazine, which I provided in the first hearing information,
Okay.
not this one, but I provided all those credentials. And then, so when I got out, so then, you know, I was put in detainment wrongfully in around 2012, attempting to, you know, properly verify medical records, and from weightlifting records to everything else. And I had an interaction with a Sam Palmer, Deputy Sam Palmer, on Highway 27, where I was going out there to try to figure out why records could not be transferred from the school district, like my weightlifting, my football, everything was written up as delusional, why I couldn't transfer information to the medical industry, and why everything was always being written up as delusional. And so I was detained, and I didn't like the report that Deputy Palmer stated. I thought it was slander. I thought he slandered me, and then I was detained and drugged wrongfully, and I didn't have a proper assessment. So then I was drugged up again in the mental health industry, and I was detained at the Carlisle Hotel, and I could barely read or write because they drugged me so bad after they sent me to Eastern State. And so once I got out, I got on Social Security, and I've been attempting to design advanced mental directive programs that individuals can use, so they're not for prevention of wrongful iatrogenic injection. So an iatrogenic disease is a disease caused by a doctor. Like if I gave you a tranquilizer, a schizophrenia tranquilizer, or a bipolar drug, or anything else, then you're chemically induced with a dependence, and then you can't properly have an assessment, or it's like chemically inducing mental health diseases. And that issue that I talk about, the iatrogenic injections. I've had a conversation with former federal administrative law judge Lloyd Tunick, and he's the one that explained what an iatrogenic disease was. And when he retired in 2003, he went all the way to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, stating that doctors were involved in insurance fraud. And so from 2014, around 13, I became an activist whom I believe is attempting to recover from an iatrogenic, illness caused by mental health drugs. And the only mental health problems I have right now relate to memory loss, short and long-term memory loss caused by the mental health drugs that I've been provided.
Ever been married?
No.
Any long-term relationships?
The longest relationship I ever had was, I had about 2 relationships for 1 year each. One with a domestic violence advocate who worked over here at YWCA, and another woman who is Ukrainian, and she was written up as a delusion in medical files too, and she's absolutely real. I lived at 1138 West Gordon, but there's also more malpractice on the files of whom I dated and such like that. And so I'd like to be able to correct all these files, and that's part of my advocacy, is correcting the files and making sure the right documents prove that I wasn't mentally ill at that time and wasn't delusional. So.
Do you have any children?
No.
What's your living situation right now?
I live at on the north side at Francis and Crestline, 2207 East Francis Avenue.
What kind of, just give me the setting?
It's a apartment complex for mental health. It's related to mental health, but it's not a group home or anything.
Do you live by yourself?
By myself. And what I'm doing now is attempting to build a company called Advanced Mental Directive, or Advanced Directive Technology, and provide the proper legal tools and programs so that individuals can properly communicate and prove their prevent from being chemically injected with iatrogenic diseases, as well as communication tools, whereas people aren't in arguments and wrongfully put out for malpractice and insurance fraud.
I'm going to ask you some questions about your substance use history.
Okay.
How old were you the first time you drank alcohol?
Probably one time I got drunk as a freshman in high school, alcohol, and then I drank very, very rarely throughout high school at parties.
Currently, how often do you drink?
Once every 3 or 4 months.
When was the last time you drank?
It's more than a month or so ago. Maybe 2 months. I'd say 2 months ago. And I didn't get very drunk. It usually just one beer.
You ever had so much to drink you blacked out?
No.
Any DUIs?
No.
You ever get withdrawals when you stop drinking?
No.
How old were you the first time you used marijuana?
I've done marijuana 3 times in my life. They were all in high school, between sophomore and junior year. I never smoked after that, and I'm a big big activist against marijuana. And I've even been published in the Inlander because of my activism at City Hall against marijuana.
How old were you the first time you used meth?
Never,
Ever used heroin?
never. No other drugs.
Ever used prescription pills to get high? Hydros, Vicodins, benzos?
So the first time I ever, when I became an advocate against the mental health industry and law enforcement back in 2006, a week before AutoZem, I wrongfully took a test for ADHD, and I didn't pass the test maybe 5 or 10 times, kept changing answers, and I was a little bit high on, I first was prescribed Ritalin, and then after Ritalin that I had allergic reaction, and then I used Adderall, and I never took those two drugs after the incident with Raymond Harding, but I was experimenting and wondering if ADHD drugs were a gateway to all the other mental health problems, and if an individual went manic on one of those drugs, if they would later be diagnosed with bipolar or other diseases. And so it was kind of an experiment that pre-AutoZem, 9 days before AutoZem incident, and there was intent. There was wrongful, illegal intent.
Do any huffing?
Nothing else.
Have you ever been to drug or alcohol treatment?
Nope.
Anyone ever suggest you go?
Nope.
What's your mood like most of the time?
Pretty good. I'm under a lot of pressure all the time because I get involved in politics and activism, and there's always strategies, and there's always individuals whom engage in very aggressive behavior and aggressive tactics, but I always persevere. And one thing, the last counselor I had, she said that when the reports came in through the plaintiff's office, because she felt like there was harassment, Ashley McGee from Frontier Behavioral Health told me that I was dealing with untruthful people who would misuse, who were stating I was a threat when I wasn't. And she said I wasn't mentally ill, I had perseverance and tenacity, and I didn't need to go there anymore. And she stated that I wasn't mentally ill, so I left after that. And that was soon after the report came in from the plaintiff that they were, and she stated that the people I was dealing with, such as Chief Meidel before he became chief, and the plaintiff, whom was my former supervisor, were untruthful. That's what her exact word was.
Are you taking any medications right now?
No.
Physical health problems, anything going on there? Have you ever been treated for a head injury?
No.
Any history of seizures?
No.
How many times have you been psychiatrically hospitalized?
3 in 2006 and 3 in 2012. Both related to activism.
Okay.
Sacred Heart and Eastern. So 3 at just an estimate.
Okay.
3 at Sacred Heart and 3 at 3 at Sacred Heart in 2006, 3 at Sacred Heart in 2012, and 1 in Eastern State in 2006, and 1 at Eastern State in 2012.
What psychiatric medications have you taken?
In the past, Invega, Depakote, Risperidol, Zyprexa, and then the Adderall and the Ritalin, and then one called, there's an antidepressant, what was it called? I can't remember the antidepressant right now.
Are you getting any outpatient mental health treatment right now?
I haven't been in mental health treatment since Ashley McGee said the people I was dealing with were untruthful, and that I had perseverance, tenacity, I wasn't mentally ill, and I needed to create, she stated, I need to create my own, I need to invent or create my own ways to work with individuals who are very difficult to work with and who engage in sometimes unethical activities, is my summary.
When was that?
That was 2006. I'm going to say 2016.
How you been sleeping lately?
I sleep every night. I always sleep at least 8.5 hours per day. Sometimes I shift when I go to bed, because if I'm too tired when I get home, I could go to bed at 5 and get up earlier. But I always get 8.5, and I've never had problems in my life with sleep, except for when there was ever chemical withdrawal from one of those psychiatric drugs. So naturally, I always sleep well.
I forgot to. Do you have a mental health diagnosis?
Well, the first one they diagnosed me with was ADHD. The second one was that was Dr. Tran. So off of all the statements I had made about all my accomplishments, he started off with schizoaffecto or something, or they labeled me schizophrenia based on not believing or not accepting any of the credentials any of my credentials. And so I still haven't figured out how to fix those, augment those files, and I would like to augment them in the future and de-diagnose myself and get off of Social Security. I think it's malpractice and insurance fraud is what I think. And I know how to archive, I know how to do my research, and I know how to correct those files based on the fact that I go back, say, to a yearbook, and I state I was best personality, copy it, and turn it in and say no. But the problem is the doctors, they write delusional, but don't actually put down exactly what I stated, whereas you could cross-reference.
Okay. Have there ever been episodes in the past where for several nights in a row you didn't need to sleep?
No. Not even in chemical withdrawal. Okay. Not several.
How's your appetite been?
Good. I eat 3 meals a day.
Any changes to your weight recently?
I've been at 185 for the last few years, around that weight.
Having any thoughts about suicide?
No.
You ever attempted suicide?
When they sent me to the Carlisle Hotel, and Dr. Bassi was refusing to authenticate my work history and writing everything as delusional into medical files, and refusing everything I stated, and he was injecting me with all these forced LRA out of Eastern State. He was injecting me with drug after drug after drug. I stated that the drugs were causing me to be suicidal. He refused to take me off the drugs, and he acknowledged what I was stating was true, but when he went into the medical files, he wrote the exact opposite of what he was stating. So I considered it malpractice, what he was doing at the time. And so I felt like my life was over because I had problems with reading, writing, and my typing skills were bad. And because of me losing my cognition, my memory, my short and long-term memory, and my skills, I thought, the brain damage from the mental health drugs was so bad that I couldn't live anymore. So I jumped in the river down at that new park under the falls, and after I jumped in, I immediately thought, well, I changed my mind, and I swam my way out and around Peaceful Valley, and then didn't tell anybody. Now, I'd been detained a day or two before that for being suicidal, and then I actually attempted suicide by jumping in the river. And then, because I'm a good swimmer, I figured out how to get out, but I barely made it, and I eventually got out at Peaceful Valley when I grabbed a tree branch, and I pulled myself up. I bruised myself from the jump, but I walked back to the Carlisle hotel, didn't tell anybody, was completely wet. The only individual who would have seen me wet is, I forget his name, but I have it somewhere in records, the clerk at the Carlisle. And I walked back up into my room, and I went to bed, and I didn't want to tell anybody. And I didn't tell anybody for years.
Are you having any thoughts about hurting anyone else right now?
I've never had any thoughts about ever hurting anybody. And any statements made by the plaintiff is wrong, or her father, and they're twisting words.
Ever see things or hear things other people don't see or hear?
Never. And that's wrong too. By Dr. Blake in Sacred Heart, I never heard anything. I think there was a problem with chemical withdrawal where there was maybe an overactive thought process, but I never actually heard anything in my life and never had a visual hallucination. No auditory.
Okay. Do you feel like there might be any individuals or groups that are monitoring you or out to harm you in some way?
There's no harm, no. I have had death threats though, and because I get involved in politics, I mean, I write the names down of the individuals that have made statements, because in politics things get volatile, and people on the street sometimes they make statements and such. I try to report it, and if you're around people with mental health problems, well, at my location there's an individual who's been not kicked out yet. Her name's Leah Burr, and she has made a lot of statements about, she's been causing problems all over the building. The police have been there many times. She's threatened to kill me quite a few times. And I've made out my police reports. Right now she's being detained. But there's problems all over the building, and she's threatened just about everybody in the building. So there is one individual. And I put out a restraining order against her, and it didn't go through because there's too many people in the building that have problems, and the stalking order didn't work the first time, but there is a hearing in late October on that issue. But she has threatened me a lot. I mean, because I called the police and they detained her, she came back and she was pounding at my door in the middle of the night and screaming and shouting. And when I walk up and down the halls, she's told me she's going to kill me, and she's threatened and stalked and even assaulted, fellow tenants. So it's a real issue.
Do you ever have problems with other people being able to hear your thoughts, or you hearing other people's thoughts?
I can't read anybody's thoughts but my own. I don't claim to be a mind reader.
Do you have any special powers or abilities?
No special powers or abilities.
Do you have any relationships, special relationships with famous or important people?
No special relationships at all. I'm just a political activist, and the politicians in the area, they know me because I go on television and I make my statements and I show up at political events, and I've been a coordinator in the past, and I have a letter of what I've done in the past on the former presidential campaign for the Dennis Kucinich campaign, of all the work I did in bringing him here. And so I'm very politically active. I talk to the commissioners. I go to the commissioners' meetings. I go to the council meetings. Everybody knows who I am, I guess, and I'm very loud and activist on Facebook.
You get special messages through the TV or the radio?
No, never.
Can you tell me the date today?
Today's September 25th, 2018.
What day of the week is today?
Today's Tuesday.
What's the name of this place?
This location is the public defender's office. Spokane Public Defender's Office.
Who's the president?
Donald Trump.
Who was the president right before him?
Barack Obama.
I'm going to tell you 3 words, just repeat them back to me. Cadillac, zebra, purple.
Cadillac, zebra, purple.
I'm going to ask you to repeat those a couple more times to remember them. Spell world for me.
W-O-R-L-D.
Spell it backwards.
Can I write it? D L R O W.
Starting from 100, count backwards by 7s.
I'm not good at that. 100, 93, 85, 78, 71, 64, 57, 50, 43, 36, 29, 28, 22. $15. $8. And then 1. I might have gotten wrong somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's all right. Next, I'll tell you 2 words. Tell me what they have in common. Start with apple and banana.
Fruit.
Train and bicycle.
I guess you'd say a vehicle for transportation or a device for transportation.
Watch and ruler.
Measurements.
What were those 3 words I asked you to remember earlier?
Cadillac. Purple. Cadillac. Purple. Forgot the other one.
This type of animal.
Zebra.
Next questions I'm going to ask you are going to have more to do with court.
Okay.
And let's start with what are you charged with?
I'm charged with internet stalking harassment.
Anything else?
Internet stalking. Oh, breaking the restraining order.
What does internet stalking mean?
I just read it. So, intent to embarrass or harm or threaten an individual over the internet in public. I think there's maybe stalking, maybe following. There might be data breach issues and following people without knowing, but also mainly what I've read it is intent to harass, intent to cause harm, intent to cause distress.
And then the violating the anti-harassment order, what does that mean?
It means that I violated a court order not to contact the plaintiff.
Is felony or misdemeanor charges?
Do I have any?
No, these charges, are they felonies or misdemeanors?
Misdemeanors, and the violating the restraining order might be I'm not sure.
It's a misdemeanor as far as I know.
Okay.
What kind of charge is usually more serious, a felony or a misdemeanor?
Felony.
If you were found guilty, what kind of sentence could you get?
I think we talked about over a year, but I haven't been explained the number of days unless it was in the first hearing. I need to know more about that, but I think it's over a year, or around 300 days is the highest, I think. I need more information on that.
If you're not sure about that, who's the best person to ask?
Chris Edwards.
if he was convicted at trial?
Maximum is 364 days
364.
for each case.
Oh.
So
600.
that would be
okay.
out of the ordinary,
Mm-hmm.
but that is the maximum.
Okay.
What would be like a more standard sentence based on his?
Are we just talking jail? Or are we talking all the entire gamut of?
Maybe jail and the fine. Like what would most people be looking at?
Anywhere between. It depends on history. He doesn't have any, so I don't think that if there was jail imposed, it would not be very long. Maybe 15 days, 30 to 15 days, 15 to 30 days. There might be some outside things such as community service or electronic monitoring.
Does that make sense? Alright. Some of these questions are going to be more like how court works.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll ask you, what are a defendant's plea options when they're first charged?
I've never read plea options.
Yeah, I think very basically.
So
when you're first arraigned,
the judge offers you a deal if you're willing to state that you're guilty, instead of going for the full case, which if you were charged, you would get more time if you were found guilty, is my generalization summary of that. So the prosecutor and the judge would, the prosecutor, I guess.
We'll kind of get to that process
Okay.
because I think I know what you're getting at, but let's back up just a little bit. If you want to tell the court that you did the crime,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to admit the crime, how does the person plead?
Guilty.
What happens to the person after they plead guilty?
There's a verdict and a decision, which is a decision, and then the individual is either sentenced or there's a ruling on what the penalty will be.
If you want to tell the court you didn't do it,
Mm-hmm.
how do you plead?
Not guilty.
And then what happens after somebody pleads not guilty?
Then it can go to trial with the jury, or I'm told in city court there's trial without. I don't know anything other than a jury, but I believe that I've been told there's another way to do a trial without a jury in city court, but I'm not sure. Like with just the judge or something. But I'm not sure about that. But my understanding is always jury. Except for if we're talking about commissioners, the commissioner makes the decision.
What is a plea bargain?
A plea bargain. It means you've been offered less time for pleading guilty to the charges.
If somebody takes a plea bargain, will they get a trial?
No.
Do they have to take the plea bargain?
No. I mean, it's the decision of the individual being asked. The decision of the defendant being asked.
What does a defense attorney do?
The defense attorney is the attorney that works with the defendant, which is myself, and they represent the defendant in court. the attorney for the defendant.
What does the prosecutor do?
The prosecutor represents the plaintiff and against the defendant, and attempts to bring charges against the defendant, and is an attorney.
Who's in charge of the court?
The judge or the commissioner.
And what does the judge do?
He represents he oversees the rules of the court and he makes sure that everyone is following the court procedures and the rules.
Which side is the judge on?
Neutral.
What does the jury do?
The jury listens to the case, takes notes, and makes a decision on a verdict. By voting.
If the person's found guilty, who decides the sentence?
The sentencing?
Mm-hmm.
The jury, or I think in some cases a judge. I'm not completely clear about that part.
Usually the judge.
Usually the judge, yeah.
Who determines the verdict in a bench trial?
A bench trial. I'm not clear on what the different types of trials. A bench trial. My guess is the judge.
Yeah.
So my guess is that a bench trial is a trial with a judge and no jury.
Correct. Do you know how it,
yeah.
Yeah, that does sound like kind of like what you were talking about earlier. Do you know how it's determined whether there's going to be a bench trial versus a jury trial?
I'm not sure how that's determined.
Okay, so that's a decision the defendant would have to make. So
Mm-hmm.
they have a right to a jury trial,
Yeah.
but they can waive that if they would prefer
Okay.
the bench trial.
Okay.
How are things going with you and your attorney?
We don't spend enough time together, and it's taken me. I'm glad that we have a psychologist because it's taken me a month to figure out, because of the iatrogenic memory loss.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't remember the full scope of the relationship with the plaintiff before this came about, when I worked under her supervision, and there were problems in the office that relate to what's going on today. And in the last month, I'm getting closer and closer to understanding how to explain this to my attorney, and I'm coming up with with appropriate laws that have been broken, which can explain the conflict with the plaintiff. And one of those is the police department has used, I believe I'm somewhat entrapped. I think there's entrapment laws. And I talked to another attorney in the area, and there's anti-SLAPP law issues of me not being able to get access to public meetings. And there's also issues with slander, and there's issues with ADA laws, Title II federal law of discrimination and not providing access, and the way she She doesn't want me in any meetings and such, and she's accusing me of being delusional, and I think it's a violation of the ADA law, Title II. And so I'm figuring out more laws all the time to bring forth, but I think that I haven't communicated appropriately with my attorney until today and yesterday, when I started bringing forth some laws that I could use to state that, I've been led into this situation by others, not following rules or laws or procedures, and there's other things that have led to this other than that are outside my own actions.
Okay. Can you work with them?
I can work with them.
Okay.
I think leading up, I think in the last month, I didn't study the laws enough but now I'm studying the laws and trying to adapt the relationship to those laws.
Okay. If somebody's trying to decide whether they're going to take a plea bargain
Mm-hmm.
versus take their case to trial,
Yeah.
what would they think about? Like, how would they make that decision?
They would make a decision based on their own perception of how things had taken place that led up to the actual charges. And based on perception, based on experience, and their own conviction of them believing they were guilty or not guilty. And so a lot of the time I talk to people and they believe that they take a plea bargain because they believe the system is corrupt and they have no chance, and they're scared, and they don't have the time to put in to write up all the paperwork, and so they take that plea bargain even if they know they're not guilty. A lot of the time, a lot of people take the plea bargain, and then people who want to go to trial are really convinced that they are innocent, and that they will have a better chance if they are heard by a jury. And I think I have no belief that the court system is corrupt. I think that the harder you work at it, the better chances you get. But it's not always exact, and it's not it's not completely scientific method, and there's no absolute proof. Sometimes, well, I mean, there's always opinions, and it's not as thorough as science, and it's not as accurate as the scientific method in the laboratory. It's not. There are mistakes, but an individual needs to work as hard as they can to defend themselves and believe that the court will do the right job. And if they feel that the court didn't do a good job, they have the right to appeal.
What does it mean to testify?
To make a statement on the stand of one's experiences pertaining to the case, and to bring forth any evidence or observations that an individual had pertaining to the case going on. Any events and what the observations are of the individual on the stand, observation of events pertaining to the case.
Is the defendant allowed to testify?
Yes.
Can they make the defendant testify?
the defendant is allowed to plead the fifth, which means to not speak.
Some defendants decide to testify. How can testifying help a defendant?
They speak on their own behalf, with their own observations of an event, which are beneficial to their position that they're not guilty.
Other defendants decide they're not going to testify. How can testifying be maybe not so good for a defendant?
If the defendant thinks their life will be endangered by making a statement that could bring up evidence of someone else that may threaten their life, then they use the Fifth Amendment. Are we talking about the defendant, or are we talking about anybody on the stand?
I'm talking about the defendant. Like, what's the risk to the defendant testifying?
That they will make a wrongful statement and end up convicting themselves. Making a statement that convinces a jury or a judge that they're guilty. Then it's better for them to plead the fifth if it's more beneficial for them to plead the fifth if they make mistakes in their communication that could cause a jury to wrongfully think they were guilty or give the perception of guilt.
If you take this case to trial, how do you feel like the trial would turn out?
I think it will turn out in my favor.
Why do you feel like it'll turn out in your favor?
Because I believe I've been entrapped by police officers. I've been provided information by the city of Spokane and its contractors. I've had my life...
So slow down.
Okay.
This down. So you believe you've been entrapped by police officers?
Entrapped. There's entrapment because I've been provided information that I would not know if I hadn't ever communicated with a police officer, and I believe they're providing me too much information. I believe that city workers have provided me too much information, and the reason for the case partially is, and I didn't state that in your questioning on paranoia or anything. When Rico, the security guard at City Hall, threatened me for going through public records, he made the statement, you going through public records in Miami, you get cinder block for that. And so I felt that was a threatening statement, and I talked to the asset manager at Ed Lucas at City Hall, and he stated that he thought that meant mafia hit, like a mob hit, for going through police records. And I think Rico's statement, has led to a lot of this, and the just unethical things by the police department that have been brought forth, unethical things by city workers that have been brought forth. I think that I've been kind of entrapped, and I'm being blocked public access to what I need in order to be productive and work with the government entity. And so that's why I think, there a lot of unethical things have gone on, and a lot of people, there's people who back me up on that. It's illegal to block someone public access, and the city's not providing proper public access, and I feel that I've been threatened for attempting to get at records, public records, and things had gone on I've been brought forth too much information and distracted while I worked for the city of Spokane back in 2008, and some of that connects to what's going on now. And there's been maneuvers in the police department related to the information I had been provided, and I wrote an amicus brief to the Gordon Ennis trial, which was very controversial, and I brought it forth with a reference from a board member from Police Leadership Advisory Committee to find a new chief, and former Commissioner Bonnie Mager's secretary, who worked with me as a colleague for the city of Spokane in 2008. A lot of information's been brought forth, and I'm not being provided. I'm just the messenger. I bring it forth. When someone tells me something, I bring it forth. And I think there's ethics issues involved.
Is it possible you could be convicted?
Yes.
Have they offered you a plea deal in this case?
Not that I know.
What kind of evidence do you think the prosecutor would present to convict you?
Evidence would be the Facebook and the Facebook messages that I put out after the recording in City Hall, which I feel the interrogation in City Hall was a little bit of entrapment. I didn't know the plaintiff would be in that meeting, and it was related to illegal activities, which I don't completely know anything about, provided by a police officer. So I felt there was entrapment there. But they will bring forth the audio, and they will bring forth the not only the audio, they'll bring forth the messages on Facebook and the emails.
If they offered you a good deal in this case, would you take it?
Probably not.
Okay, so you're saying there's like Facebook messages and emails that occurred. I'm assuming that these are from after the anti-harassment order was entered.
No, all emails and the Facebook messages in question are before the order was put in place.
Okay.
And the only violation of the order was through the police chief's office, where I stated that I was scared because I'd been provided too much information, and the plaintiff's supervisor stated in situations like this, police officers have ended up dead around the country. And so then I got scared, and I went on Facebook.
Okay.
And so I'm being entrapped into information provided by Detective Harvey on, he'd state that we have a problem in this city on sequestered property, extramarital affairs, and I wrote it out, and probation, and he has a disagreement with the current administration, and I'm trying to build products. All I want is access to civilian oversight meetings, which I was referenced to by former Chief Frank Straub before the plaintiff ever ended up in that department. So all I want is access, my constitutional right to access to a meeting, and I've been entrapped in a lot of information I don't have any interest in, and it scares me, and I continually bring it forward, but I'm blocked access from the proper meetings I'm supposed to go to. So, I don't know what to do with information. That's the problem. Once a police officer provides me information on illegal activities, I immediately go forward. I go to HR, I go to, and I don't keep information. And so that's the situation right now. And the rules have been changed in the procedural manual by the plaintiff's supervisor, where officers aren't supposed to be bringing information forward anymore. And it's a rules violation. And so I don't know. The problem is that I didn't know what to do.
Okay.
And there was never any, in the harassment law, intent to harass, intent to intimidate, intent to make someone feel bad or anything like that. A lot of the stuff that was on Facebook didn't even have anything to do with the plaintiff. It's why I'm not being provided proper access. And I stated in the Facebook messages, why am I not being provided proper access to the meetings, and why am I being provided all this information? I just want to go to meetings.
Okay. What would be the best outcome to your case?
Not guilty and able to attend public access meetings without any interference on any illegal activities and any names provided by any officers or individuals in the area anymore on any illegal activities. I don't want that information. I don't want to have to bring things forward. And so if I'm not guilty and somehow I gain access, I'm in what Frank Straub said, it's an incubator office where I'm building my product designs, I'm building my company in the incubator, and I'm not provided anything illegal or anything that could get me in trouble or anything that could threaten my life. No information that I don't need to know as a civilian. I don't need to know that information on any name of any officer that's committing anything wrong. I'm okay with just generalizations of something went on in New York City or something went on in California or something this. But I don't want to be provided, the problem is I'm being provided too much information with actual names of officers in Spokane of doing wrong, and I'm just a civilian. And so I bring...
Who's providing that information?
Detective Harvey is the main individual that has warned against me ever going forward and working on my project because of the corruption in the current administration. And then there's always the police chief had come down and gotten in an argument with the detective, and then me questioning things. But I did a little research in the federal building to why that argument exists. Mainly came from the detective about, like, it's not safe to do business with this department, I don't think, because on my own. And I feel like, and so I would stand back and wait and protest, but I would rather have no information, no understanding of conflict, and just go into the public meetings in the civilian oversight, under the civilian oversight department.
What would be the worst outcome to your case?
Guilty, and no way to appeal.
If we set aside the best outcome and we set aside the worst outcome, what do you think the most likely outcome would be?
Appeal.
So do you think you'll get convicted and have to appeal it?
So if we said about that, so worst, I was saying that's the middle ground, right?
Okay.
The worst and the best.
Well, the most
That'd be
likely
middle.
isn't necessarily the middle ground. Like, what do you think the most likely outcome to the case is?
I think eventually I could get it overturned if I work hard enough. But I'd have to continue to study the law, go to Gonzaga and keep researching books and trying to explain this, like, around the clock.
Okay. Do you have any conviction history at all?
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you have 90-day LRAs in the hospital.
Would this be the type of thing that'd be eligible for like a deferred prosecution kind of deal?
It's possible. The problem, I mean, if I can speak,
Yeah, go.
is that the parties involved are involved in the police department.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes a little bit more difficult to navigate that with something that he might be able to accomplish in the end, or want to accomplish. So what I foresee being offered would be something that will allow the case to be dismissed, but you'd have to agree to get mental health evaluation outside of this, and to continue treatment. That's what I would foresee.
Continue, treatment?
Yeah, so so for example, if you went to Frontier Behavioral again, and they said you need to do these 5 things, you would have to do those 5 things as part of it.
And they might say something different, or like they said I'm not mentally ill and I need to resolve my own problems through a creative process on my own last time I was there.
Well, if that's what the new evaluation,
they could say that.
If that's what the new evaluation says,
okay,
then that's what it says.
Okay.
But you'd have to get evaluated first.
Okay.
If mental health court were an option, would that be something?
What's mental health court?
Usually it's it's like 2 years. You gotta like follow their treatment recommendations, and I think at the end of that, typically it's dropped. Isn't that how?
That's usually how it works. It's a difficult process. You would be going to court at least for the first part of it, at least 2 times a month, and again, same thing. If you would have to get a mental health evaluation, follow along with whatever that mental health evaluator told you to do.
So I have a question. So if the option was not guilty, if you follow the recommendations of, say, Frontier Behavioral Health, could I make the decision after having a review by Frontier Behavioral Health of what their treatment options were?
Certainly, you can go to.
I could see it first before making the final decision.
If you go to Frontier Behavioral tomorrow.
Yeah.
And get that done. That information is just between you and Frontier.
And I can state that I don't like your recommendation. I want to go forth.
You can, yeah.
After they provide the recommendation.
Yeah, and like I say, if you do this before there's any verdict in the case, whether that's or an outcome like a stipulated order of continuance that ends in a dismissal, if you do all that stuff beforehand,
before they even make this,
it's just between you and
service
wherever
provider.
you go.
Correct. So tomorrow I can go to the service provider and state that I want a proper evaluation related to what we're talking about right now, and I can get that done before it's even offered.
You can start the process, or at least know what the
outcome
what the diagnosis is. Yes.
What would I ask?
Just you go in and ask for a mental health evaluation.
Okay.
So if those options were like, if you got like a recommendation that was like something you could live with, would either of those 2 options be something you'd consider?
And it'd be would I get a not guilty?
I think
you would end in a dismissal.
A dismissal. I'm okay.
Now it wouldn't be immediate. You'd have to. You would be over the course of time.
Yeah.
Meaning that you couldn't get any new charges, and again you'd have to follow along with the treatment plan. And if you did both of those things, the case would be dismissed.
I'd consider. My main goal is to be provided proper access, be blocked from anyone providing me that's a public employee or contractor working in City Hall any insider information on any wrongdoing, and be able to build my products the way I need to. I don't need all this insider stuff that they have created by trapping me.
When was the last time you were in court on this charge?
That was in June 9th, I think.
What happened in court that day?
I stated that I was an informant pre-AutoZem, and that pretty much the summary is that I questioned how the plaintiff and I came into contact in 2008, and I stated that I had a counterclaim of being blocked access to meetings, and I pretty much stated that I wanted to go to a different city because I didn't have a degree in law enforcement investigation, and I had too much information on my hands. I was provided too much information. The plaintiff stated that she never wants to see me again, and that there was no reason to talk to her father. And I asked why I made a statement about her father ever working for the city based on my question of why he was reviewing my project in 2008 and suspicion of illegal activities taking place while he was reviewing my city project. But I didn't come completely forth to the court about what those illegal activities were verbally, but I did write up my account of what had taken place and my concern.
And you provided that information in
I think I've I don't know if I
I think it's in
I hope so.
in that.
There was an illegal data breach pop-up, and the plaintiff's mother was yelling that was her daughter. I guess she's stating that's Kathy, the name of her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this seems too set up because he's reviewing my project and all of a sudden a pop-up comes up, and I don't know who did it, and I'm still looking for if a report was turned in or if any proper procedures, and I would like the plaintiff to properly explain what had taken place. But it seems like I had been told hearsay afterwards about the plaintiff's father being trespassed from city property, and the plaintiff in the trial stated that wasn't true, that he was, and so, but she didn't state that nothing that I stated about her father in the court was all fabricated. I'm missing some evidence, and I'm wondering why it happened and the values of the people I'm working with, the ethics. Again, I'm questioning.
Has anything strange or weird ever happened in court?
Yes. She asked for to follow the rules as if we had been in a sexual relationship when we hadn't. And she wanted
Well, slow down to act as if you'd been in a sexual relationship and you hadn't?
yeah, and so she wanted, that's when I was like, I said, give the plaintiff everything she wants, and I'm going to a different city. But she had made statements years ago in 2008 that she wanted a law that pertained to not having sex with someone and increasing the stalking law. And then she asked for that particular law that she invented in her head in court to the judge, where her father would not have to come in to sign the restraining order. And the clerk, it was so she's asking for a law that doesn't exist in the state of Washington, because my understanding from what Barbieri stated, Deputy Steve Barbieri stated that stalking laws pertain to sex, they don't pertain to what you're doing, as in wanting to gain access to meetings and wanting someone's schedule and things like that. And then she stated years ago that she wanted some sort of law that didn't have to do with sex, whereas she could state that someone was stalking her without there ever having been a relationship. And then she used this new concept, this new idea, this new proposal for a law in court. And when the clerk came back, she said, here's your paperwork, Mr. Armstrong. And I'm like, my name's not Mr. Armstrong, it's Mr. McDowell. It's Mr. Alan McDowell. And I have never been in a sexual relationship with this woman, but when she insinuated, like, well, if we had been in a relationship, then I would get this, this, and this. And so that matched what she had been stating years ago in 2008. And she stated that I had caused her a mental illness kind of in the declaration. The declaration is very strange, and it relates to the work that we did in 2008. Her father, I was told that her father trained students at WSU in declaration writing, and I thought the declaration was far-fetched to say that everything I state is schizophrenia and delusional. And it was stated years ago by my colleague as a warning that individuals in government will attempt to have sex with you, and if a relationship occurs, the government body can later take the individual you've had a relationship with and put them in a completely different department and block you access to do your research and development, your contracts, and this and that. And she kept warning me, but she's also warning about locked doors in the facility, and was referencing a woman named Floozy. The word, I have never previously known the word floozy. That's an old-time term for promiscuous woman or prostitute in the workplace, and she references this in the workplace. This is my former colleague, Karen Palmer. And so she's warning me about locked doors years ago, and the plaintiff did kind of sexually harass me in an office in a locked door, and my colleague started banging on the door and broke it up. And it relates to, my colleague, whom had worked at all levels of government, stated that any kind of relationship and locked doors and this and that could cause blocked access to a department years later if the individual was, like a supervisor, was ever moved and there was pairings. And so now even before the plaintiff ever got to the police department, I wanted access to her office through Frank Stroud, the current office, the civilian department office. She was not in that department when we had the conversation. So she gets moved over, and now there's similarities to what I'm being warned years ago. And the plaintiff stated that I caused her a mental illness in the declaration. Well, she stated years ago in 2008 that you couldn't cause a person a mental illness, that it was kind of a government. Well, my colleague stated that it was a government move, unethical or illegal maneuver to state that a government worker was caused mental illness by a contractor, an individual trying to gain access. It was kind of a political strategy. But she used that in court, and I said, this is bizarre and strange, and it relates to what was being stated years ago.
Okay. Have you ever gotten in trouble while you were in court?
No.
If somebody acts out in court, what can happen to them?
They can be thrown out, so I'll provide you an explanation of getting in trouble in court. So in our actual trial, now I've been in hundreds of trials, reviewing trials over the last 3 years, maybe even 1,000. I've come to court every day in order to design proper products. I have never seen use of force ever used in a courtroom. So under Judge Terry Goebel, on June 9th, an individual acted up in court. And Judge Goebel stated that he was going to get the individual that was up on the stand before I went up on the stand, a guardian ad litem. And the individual continually escalated. So if you escalate, you could lose all your rights and be provided a guardian ad litem. And so something strange went on in that court where the plaintiff supervisor used force on the individual that was provided the guardian ad litem due to the escalation.
Was this case before yours?
Yeah, before mine. So the plaintiff became like a supervisor, like a referee, watching use of force of her supervisor on an actual defendant in Terry Goebel's court, after Terry Goebel stated that the individual would be provided a guardian ad litem, and because of the escalation, the individual was incoherent. And so that you could be provided a guardian ad litem and lose all your rights.
Can you get more charges if you have double?
Or more, yes. And I'm sure he was probably provided a charge, but I don't know what those charges are for escalation in the courtroom.
If you were in court and someone told a lie about you,
Mhm.
what would you do?
Objection and perjury. I'd state objection and perjury.
You would state that?
Well, I would provide the information to my attorney, but under the law, I guess, as we were in court before, the individual has a First Amendment right, and I don't know how. I did exercise my right in the last court.
Did you get in trouble for that?
No, I actually brought forth the information, and he denied my motions. So we went through procedures, and he went through an explanation of what I needed to do to speak, and we went through those procedures. I asked for the motion, I was denied the motion, and provided an explanation of why the motion was denied. I wouldn't do that in a regular trial. I'm just trying to bring forth motions in order for summons and to subpoena information. And as my attorney states, that this court doesn't provide subpoenas in the way other courts. It doesn't have the power to collect evidence like all courtrooms.
Okay. So if someone goes to trial and they're found guilty,
Yes.
what happens?
They are forced to obey the decision of the judge after the verdict. So as you stated before, the jury may come back with a verdict, and then the sentencing might be provided by the judge, and then the defendant is within has to follow, has no choice, follows whatever the decision is by the judge on the sentencing or the guidelines, sentencing guidelines and such.
If somebody goes to trial and they're found not guilty, what happens?
The individual is set free, and there's no penalties, except for the documents that are still on the books that state that not guilty. And I don't know how that's the throwing out things, and I'm not completely certain on everything to do with not guilty. But my understanding is that the individual goes free without any restrictions. Now, I don't know how the paperwork afterward just sticks on the books, I guess. I don't know everything.
Well, let's just review a couple things we already talked about. Who determines the verdict in a bench trial?
The judge.
Who decides whether there's going to be a bench trial or a jury trial?
The defendant.
Your attorney kind of estimated a standard sentence if you were convicted. Do you remember what he said?
364
That was the max.
was the max, and 15 to 30 with a ankle bracelet and maybe work release or something, or
were those 3 words I asked you to remember earlier?
Zebra, purple, Cadillac.
Can't think of any more questions to ask you today. What happens next is I just take all the information and I report, and then you guys go from there.
Do you need any evidence to explain that I'm not delusional based on anything I've stated today, or any evidence that was put forth in the declaration by the plaintiff? So she made a lot of statements about delusions and schizophrenia.
So I have all the police reports.
Yeah.
I have whatever you've given me here.
Yeah.
Part of this will involve going through some medical records, and if there's some at Sacred Heart and Eastern, I'll be reviewing those, and if there's any at Frontier, I'll probably review those too.
So I'm in disagreement with the Eastern ones, and I'd like to augment them.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I'm with actual evidence, and if there's any questions of stating delusions or this or that, I would like the ability to, you know, defend myself with actual evidence to state this is what I did, and, you know.
Okay. So what I put in my notes that you dispute those records, and, and you're not in agreement with them. And so what I always do in my report is, okay, well, this information came from here, this information came from you, or this wherever it came from. Okay.
If there's any questions, I would like the ability to, that you were stating something, you know, was against what I was stating, I would like the ability to come forth and bring actual evidence. So, I mean, like, if you see something at Eastern and you say, this contributes to this, I would appreciate or like the ability to bring forth anything to dispute it.
Make sure you do stuff like that through your attorney.
Okay.
Don't send it directly to me.
Or Eastern, no.
Yeah. Or, I wouldn't even do that. I'd make sure that all goes through your attorney.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
So should I leave now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll walk you out.
You know what day we have court next? I need to get the... We have court on... I'll ask the front desk.
It's okay. I just didn't know if you knew it off the top of your head.
You know what?
I have to look. Okay. I don't remember either.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'll go to Frontier and get an evaluation.
Okay.